And before I give my opening remarks, I would actually like to bring the chair of the Grand Rapids Community Relations Commission, who's co-hosting with us tonight. Ellen?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellen James, and I'm the chairperson of the Grand Rapids Community Relations Commission. First of all, I would like to ask members of the commission that are present if they would please stand. I think we do have a person. Thank you so much, Chris. And again, let me say good afternoon. I would like, on behalf of the Grand Rapids Community Relations Commission, I would like to welcome the Michigan Department of Civil Rights here today. I would also like to welcome each and every one of you who've come out this afternoon. We believe that, and we certainly thank you for coming. Some will listen and others will testify, but we're happy to have you here because we believe that it is so important when you are making decisions that you need to have input from people. And we very strongly believe that. The ordinance that you will be talking about today is one that the City of Grand Rapids adopted in 1994, the Community Relations Commission. So we believe that we are a leader in this area. We have been called on a number of times to share the information and the process. And just a little about the Grand Rapids community relations that I'll just share. I'm not going to read this whole page, so don't get excited. We have been community relations since 1955, and in 1953, the mayor of the city of Grand Rapids pulled a group of people together to talk about relationships between people in the community. Was it a good relationship? Was it a relationship that needed some improvement, or was everything okay? Well, imagine. This commission found out that there were a number of things in the community that we needed to talk about. So that commission was formed, the Community Relations Commission was formed at that time. Over the years, we have gone through a series of hearings, talking to people. We have done investigations, numerous investigations, anything that will involve making our community a better place. So this afternoon, again, I welcome you, and I hope you will have a wonderful afternoon of discussion. Thank you so much.
Are we on? Yes, okay. On behalf of the department, I would like to thank the Grand Rapids Community Relations Commission for co-sponsoring this event. Patty Cotto, their staff member, has been particularly helpful in this event, in organizing this event, so thank you very much, Patty. I would also like to welcome all of you to the fourth in a series of hearings that the department is conducting around the state. The department received a grant from the Tides Foundation to conduct a one-year social research project objectively examining the impact Michigan's non-discrimination laws and policies have on families, communities, the state, and its economy. This project is not connected to any actions that have been or will be taken by the Michigan State Legislature. This is an independent project. The public testimony provided this afternoon may be used in our final report to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. This report will likely be available online to the public in early 2013. We will be taking testimony for roughly the next 2 hours. Speakers from the public will be given 5 minutes to deliver their testimony. When you have 1 minute remaining, I will hold up the yellow card. When you have no minutes remaining, I will hold up the red card. At that point, please try to wrap up your testimony. Please keep your testimony focused on how amending Michigan's non-discrimination laws to include sexual orientation and gender identity would change your life or that of a family member, impact your community or neighborhood, impact or change your business operations, workforce, or services, and or affect your perception of others. The department is seeking testimony from individuals both in favor of and against possible changes to the state's non-discrimination laws. If you wish to deliver testimony, please fill out a comment card and hand it to Sarah, who is in the maroon shirt back there. Sarah, could you just wave again? We will do our best to call people up in the order in which the cards were received. Please keep your remarks civil. Personal attacks and foul language will not be tolerated. If such language is used, you will be asked to step down. If you have a written copy of your testimony, please hand it to either Sarah or myself before you leave. And please be aware that this hearing is being taped, so that it's being taped both by the department, so that we may review the testimony that's given tonight, as well as by the media. If for any reason that causes problems for you, please know that you can still give us your testimony via email, or if you have brought written testimony with you, you may also, as I said earlier, hand it to either Sarah or me. We recognize that there are people who would like to speak this afternoon. I don't believe we'll have problems that we've had in some of the other locations. I think that everyone will likely get a chance to have their voices heard. But on the outside chance that we are suddenly flooded with people and you are unable to deliver your testimony due to time constraints, please know that there is both another hearing in Detroit next Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. on the Wayne State campus, and you are also, as I said, able to deliver your testimony to us via email. So with that being said, I'm going to call up our first speaker, Julia, is it Henshaw? All right.
Thank you. My name is Julia Henshaw, and I'm here from the ACLU of Michigan, the West Michigan Regional Office here in Grand Rapids. First off, I want to publicly thank the MDCR for their work in hearing Michigan's voices. Their fair approach in casting a wide net to encompass all sides of the issue is an excellent example of democracy in action, of giving everyone a voice, and it's something that I personally, and I know that the ACLU also values and respects. So thank you, Regina and Sarah, and all the other members of the MDCR for your work on this excellent project. My name is Julia Henshaw, and I'm from the ACLU of Michigan, and I'm a proud resident of Grand Rapids. I'm speaking to you tonight from my personal perspective as well as from the ACLU perspective. I believe that the state of Michigan must outlaw discrimination against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community in order to be viewed as a tolerant, forward-thinking state in which to live, work, and do business. Tolerance and inclusion is good for business. In addition to offering tax incentives and other economic advantages, Michigan must be viewed as open and forward-thinking in order to attract the high-quality companies that we need. Further, Michigan's young talent is leaving the state. We must offer young people the kinds of communities in which they want to live and work. Vibrant, tolerant, and diverse communities if we want them to stay here. Amending the state constitution to include protections for LGBT persons is the right thing to do, because currently there are no protections for LGBT persons at the state level. So in general, it is legal to discriminate against LGBT people in employment, housing, and public accommodations. In 2012, it should be against the law to deny someone a job, housing, or services simply because of their sexual orientation. I grew up in West Michigan, and I understand the desire to protect and preserve familiarity and like-mindedness. I want to hold on to the ideals that have been handed down for generations. But in Grand Rapids, we simply can no longer afford to bury our heads in the sand. Our state is dying, and if we can't offer it some sort of economic and social hope, we'll be lost. That hope can begin in progressive cities like Grand Rapids. Please do the right thing for the state of Michigan, for our community, and for those LGBT folks who are simply asking for equal recognition as human beings. Thank you. Thank you.
Rhonda Bacon.
Hello. I thank the state of Michigan and the city of Grand Rapids for making this opportunity available. I am a transgendered individual, and I'm also a disabled individual, and I do have issues with Grand Rapids' availability of facilities to disabled people, but that's another matter. The matter at hand today is that as I was recovering from my disabilities, as I continued to recover, I applied for a job with the state and federal funded foster grandparents program. And the first time I applied, it was still legal to turn me down because my gender presentation did not match my legal identification. But then the next year they turned me down because they said that anybody who had been turned down before was no longer eligible. Didn't have anything to do with my education. I've got 4 master's degrees. Didn't have anything to do with my ability to deal with children. I have 14 grandchildren and 2 children of my own. It didn't have anything to do with my ability to relate to other human beings, to be sympathetic, understanding, or to encourage young students to develop self-consideration and self-confidence, which I feel are vital now and totally lacking. But just because I did not look like the name that was on my driver's license at the time, I did not look like a Richard. And that was the only reason they gave me. Now, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sam Jones-Darling.
First, I'd like to thank the MDCR and the Grand Rapids Community Relations Commission. It is very important that we do amend Elliott Larson for many reasons. One, which I'll start with now, I grew up in the city of Grand Rapids. I was born in the year that the ordinance was passed. Actually, about 4 months before it was passed. But I've grown up knowing very little discrimination, and I believe it's due to this fact. I've seen it, I've seen other people experience it, and it is tolling. It is tolling on our youth, which go through problems every day in school. It is tolling on the unemployed, who, if you're like myself, some are gay, some are lesbian, some are bisexual, and some are transgendered. I wear that happily on my arm, as displayed by my wristband. And it is a part of me, and it is a part of me that I love. And if I was to walk into a business and I wanted a job there, I could be denied if I wasn't in the city of Grand Rapids. And it is because of my orientation. It's not because I don't work well, because I have been told, and I have many references that I work excellent. But I step outside of the city limits, and that doesn't matter. It just matters who I love. And I shouldn't be denied that right because I'm gay. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Ray.
My name is Kevin Ray. I don't live in Grand Rapids, but I grew up in Grand Rapids area and still live in Kent County. I'm not a homophobe or a bigot, despite some of the popular attributes that some people use. But I don't believe that amending the state discrimination policy is the right thing to do. I don't favor discrimination against anybody. In fact, if I thought that discrimination against people just because they experience same-sex attractions actually outweighed other factors, then I would have to actually support it. But from the impression that I get from those who are promoting these changes, I get the feeling that it's much more part of an agenda to promote acceptance of homosexual activity and relationships than ending real discrimination. In other areas where this has taken place, we've seen a progression of essentially tyranny against those who don't agree with it. In other states in this country, for example, adoption agencies have been left with no choice but to abandon their practice for not placing children with same-sex couples. In other places, there have been public school students and teachers suspended just for publicly voicing their disapproval of homosexual practice. In other countries, in Canada, there's restrictions on free speech. You can criticize and make fun of traditional marriage all you want, but if you do that with a same-sex marriage, you can get investigated and charged with a crime. It goes even further than that, and recently in Denmark, the Evangelical Lutheran Church must now solemnize same-sex weddings, and there's very real and valid concern that that's going to be extended to other churches as well. And the real problem is that same-sex relationships are a weak thing, and I don't mean weak in that the people involved in them don't think they love each other just as much as I love my wife, but they do not have the history and the force that, for instance, traditional marriage does. So whenever you tend to protect a weak thing, the weaker a thing to be protected, the stronger that protection must be. And that's why it becomes a tyranny against those who don't agree with it.
Thank you. Jeff Smith?
Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to address a couple of things. First of all, I don't identify as LGBT or Q, but I consider myself an ally. So I'm very much in favor of the state amending the LA-Larson Act to include LGBT rights in that state legislation, that state law. First, I just wanted to say that last year, several of us completed a project called the LGBT History of Grand Rapids, where we interviewed 70 people over a 6-month period and produced an hour, 40-minute long documentary. There's a website that has the film, it has all the interviews, it has all these other historical documents like the passing of the ordinance here in '94 that's at grandrapidslgbthistory.com. And I think it not only speaks to the rich history of the struggle in this area of what people have been able to achieve, but one of the conclusions that one could draw from that based upon the testimony of the people we interviewed ranging from the age of 17 to 82 was that discrimination still is persistent in West Michigan, and particularly in Grand Rapids. Two examples I wanted to cite that I'm aware of that I have had some involvement in is that, and the ACLU has had some involvement in this as well, there have been several men who identify as gay who've been targeted by the Kent County Sheriff's Department at parks and who have been arrested for nothing more than talking to other men. They have a case pending on that, and I think that's another example of the legal system sort of wasting tax money targeting men who are just having conversations with other men. So that's one thing, I think. More recently, at East Hills Community Neighborhood Association hosted an event called Gay Day Celebration, which was in early August of this year. And at that event, towards the end of it, about 7 o'clock in the evening, a group of men who are part of a religious sect on the other side of a fence where this park was being held threatened numerous people. They threatened women with rape. but they also threatened people who publicly stated that they were identified as LGBT, and they referred to them in derogatory terms using faggot, and said that they should be sodomized and that they should be raped and that they should be killed. This information was shared with the Grand Rapids Police Department, with the Community Relations Commission of Grand Rapids. There was at least a dozen people who were direct recipients of those threats. And as of today, and this is almost a month and a half later, we're not aware of any legal action that's been taken against it, even though many of the people who experienced that felt that it was, and those of us who there witnessed it felt it was these were forms of hate speech when they threatened to rape and kill people based upon either their gender or because of their sexual orientation. So to me, it's a reflection that despite the gains that have been made in Grand Rapids, we have a way to go, and I think that including an amendment, amending the Elliott Larson Act to include LGBT rights in the legislation is not only necessary, it's the just thing to do. Thank you.
Can I be allowed to speak again? I need to rebut that guy with the religious hang-up.
Why don't we, let me get through everyone the first time around.
Yeah, I'll go last.
Okay. Jennifer Keller? Okay. Well, Rhonda, if you would like to take the podium again, you are more than welcome to. And again, I'm gonna have to ask you to limit your response to 5 minutes again, but.
Rhonda, and one of the things that I want to address that was brought up by the gentleman there, I'm a Lutheran also. I've been on the pastor's board, chairman of board of trustees, and several other positions for the Lutheran Church, also reading the scripture. But one of the things that I noticed in reading other things was that the U.S. Constitution guarantees freedom of religion, but in that sentence, it also guarantees freedom from religion. And discrimination on the basis of your particular religious preference is not legal. It violates the U.S. Constitution. And my ability and my function in this community should not be allowed to be judged because some Muslim or some Christian or some Buddhist or Hinduist objects to it. That's why the United States is the United States. That's why we don't riot every time somebody makes a Christian movie. And it is important that that be recognized not only by the federal government, but by the state, which is bound by the U.S. Constitution.
As of right now, I've received testimony from several people in the room. Are there any other people who wish to give comments at this time? All right. Since we have just barely scraped in under a half hour into the forum, or the hearing, I'm going to suggest that we take a quick 10-minute recess. I know that sometimes we generally have people show up at around 45 minutes in. If you would like to deliver further testimony, you're more than welcome to. Please just come up and let me know, and we will reconvene at 4:40. Thank you. Since it is 4:40, we have one more person who would like to deliver testimony again. So Sam, if you would like to approach the podium again.
Hello. Test. It's on. I think it's on. Okay. First, I just wanted to quickly say that I wish to read a passage from the First Amendment here. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. This borders on the fact of the people that would argue that amending Elliot Larson would be promoting homosexuality, which is against their religion. This comes from a lot of faiths, and in my own faith, homosexuality is accepted, mainly because we accept all. Now, the problem with denying someone equal rights is that, on a basis of religion, is that not everybody here has the same religion as you. And to deny someone the equal rights that they deserve under the Constitution, and more directly under the 14th and 5th Amendment, would, as the state of Michigan's doing, cause many people to have hardship. And we've already heard testimony that there are people here that have hardship, even in the city of Grand Rapids. And I don't want to see that continue. I don't want my children to have to deal with that. I don't want future generations 20, 30 years from now saying, you guys didn't do this, so now we have to. I truthfully don't want to be standing here when I'm some of you guys' age and have to come back to this and say, I didn't do this. I didn't make someone do this. I want everybody to be equal. I think that's what this Constitution calls for. It's what we as human beings should believe, that everyone is created equal. And it's what our founders believed. And it's what the state constitution says.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to deliver testimony at this time? Okay. Well, I'm going to hang around for a little while longer. If more people decide to come in and deliver testimony, they're free to do so. Call your friends, call your neighbors, let them know about this event. And again, if you wish to deliver additional testimony and do not feel comfortable doing so tonight, you are more than welcome to send your testimony to me. My contact information is on the blue sheet at the back of the room, and I will be here until about 5:30, 6 o'clock. So, milling around. But thank you all for coming, and thank you to those of you who shared your testimony. I know that's a very brave thing to do sometimes, so thank you.